He paid his black ex $1 million to disappear. 10 years later, she bought his company, but the check wasn't the end. It was the fuse. The check was written in smooth black ink, Smith & Company letterhead, gleaming under the penthouse chandelier. $1 million. Payable to Amari Jones. Memo line. For your silence and your future. Amari stared at it, her manicured hands shaking so hard, the paper looked like it might take flight. It wasn't the number that broke her. It was the timestamp on the betrayal. 10 years ago, she was the 28-year-old vice president of marketing at Smith & Company. The rising star who turned a dying cosmetics line into a $200 million empire. Her name was whispered in boardrooms, celebrated at women in business galas, and at night when the city lights faded against the glass walls of the penthouse, she was his. Marcus Smith's fiancée. They were the power couple, the kind investors loved, the heir and the genius who built his fortune, until tonight. Marcus stood by the window, his reflection a silhouette against the storm. He didn't turn when she whispered, voice shaking, "You're choosing the board over me." He stayed silent, only the rain hitting the glass. "They said I was a risk," he said finally, tone low, tired. "They said the optics were dangerous." Amari's stomach turned. "Because I'm black?" He said nothing, and that silence told her everything. Her diamond engagement ring caught the chandelier's light as she slid it from her finger. It landed on the marble table with a small final click. "You're going to let them destroy us," she said softly. Marcus finally turned, his expression carved in something like regret, but not enough of it. "They'll destroy both of us if you stay." He slid the check toward her. "Take it. Leave the city. Never come back." For a moment, Amari couldn't breathe. Her world, the empire she'd helped build, the man she trusted, the life she'd envisioned, collapsed into that one motion. She took the pen, signed the NDA. Then with a deep, shuddering breath, she gathered her single suitcase and walked out into the rain. No goodbye, no looking back. Just the cold sting of betrayal and $1 million that felt more like blood money than a gift. 3 days later, the second bomb dropped. Amari woke to her phone vibrating nonstop. Text after text, missed calls, and then the headline that shattered whatever dignity she had left. TMZ exclusive. Smith heir dumps black fiancé after embezzlement scandal. Below it, her picture. Her professional headshot, smiling, confident, now plastered beneath words that branded her a thief. Her chest went cold. She clicked open the article. It included screenshots, fake emails, falsified bank transfers, fabricated proof that she'd stolen company funds. All of it a lie. She called Marcus, straight to voicemail. She called again, then again, until finally, his assistant picked up. "Mr. Smith is unavailable," the voice said sharply. "Please direct any further communication through legal channels." Legal channels. That was the moment Amari realized. He wasn't just breaking up with her, he was erasing her. By evening, the story had spread across every major outlet. The comments section, a battlefield of mockery and coded racism. Should have known better than to trust someone like her. She looked like trouble from day one. No one questioned the evidence. No one defended her name. Marcus Smith released a short statement. "We are saddened by recent events. Smith & Company remains a privately held family company committed to transparency and ethical leadership." He never said her name, never denied the lies. And then, 2 months later, he married Olivia Whitmore. Blonde, connected, daughter of a board member. The perfect PR fairy tale. Under Marcus and Olivia Smith and Company's stock soared. Awards poured in. They graced magazine covers with headlines like "The Power Duo Reinventing Beauty." Meanwhile, Amari, once the genius behind the empire, was blacklisted. Recruiters ghosted. Partners withdrew. Her reputation was radioactive. For weeks, she barely left the small apartment she'd rented in Atlanta. Curtains drawn, laptop closed, her framed diplomas lying face down on the floor. But the thing about a woman like Amari Jones, silence didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. The $1 million sat untouched for nearly 6 months. Amari stared at it every night, the number that ruined her life glowing coldly on the screen. Then one morning she got up before dawn, brewed herself a cup of coffee, opened her laptop. A blank business plan stared back. She typed 2 words, Jones Glow. By sunrise she had a name, a vision, and a fire in her chest she hadn't felt since before Marcus. She took $900,000 of the hush money and invested it into a tiny skincare startup space in Atlanta. Just a bare office with peeling paint and flickering lights. She hired 3 black chemists, all brilliant, all overlooked by major beauty companies. They worked for months. Late nights, takeout, dinners, laughter that turned to exhaustion, then back to laughter again. Their first formula? A serum that targeted hyperpigmentation, the kind luxury brands ignored, the kind that didn't fit the marketing demographic. They called it Formula Number 1. When they launched, Amari's team expected a modest start, maybe a few thousand in sales if they were lucky. Instead, within 47 minutes, every single bottle was gone. Social media exploded. Black influencers, skincare enthusiasts, dermatologists couldn't stop talking about it. Finally, a brand that sees us. Jones Glow is changing the game. Orders doubled, then tripled. By the end of the year, Jones Glow had crossed $3.2 million in revenue. And Amari? She walked through her modest Atlanta office every morning with quiet pride. She didn't chase the spotlight. She let results speak. Every formula, every campaign, every success, built by the same woman Marcus had tried to erase. By the 5th year, Jones Glow had become a phenomenon. $180 million in revenue. Exclusive partnerships with Sephora, Ulta, and Target. Features in Forbes, Essence, and Vogue. A decade after walking away from Smith & Company, Jones Glow had grown from one woman's comeback story into a billion-dollar empire. The same timeline that would soon circle back to Marcus. But Amari's mind wasn't just on growth. It was on revenge. Not loud, not vengeful, strategic, elegant. She funneled every purchase through a Cayman blind trust managed by a Swiss fiduciary she'd met at a Women in STEM gala. The trust's beneficiary, listed only as AJ Future Holdings, no public link to Amari Jones. Through a network of shell companies, she began acquiring small stakes in distribution chains, marketing firms, and supply lines. The very arteries that kept the beauty industry alive. One acquisition in particular made her pause. Whitmore Logistics, a failing luxury distribution chain on the brink of bankruptcy. Olivia's maiden name. Amari smiled. She bought 51% under a different holding company, Elysian Ventures. No one traced it back to her. From the outside, it looked like a quiet business move. Inside, it was the beginning of her silent takeover. And when she acquired Whitmore Logistics, she quietly inherited every archive server, every old text, email, and file the company ever stored. Whitmore Logistics was deeply tied to Smith & Company's supply chain. Every shipment, every inventory movement ran through them. Within a year, Amari controlled how Smith & Company's products reached the shelves. And Marcus? He had no idea. 7 years had passed since the night Amari vanished from New York. To the public, Marcus Smith was still the golden boy of luxury cosmetics. A visionary, a CEO who'd modernized Smith & Company. But behind the polished magazine covers and press tours, the empire was crumbling. Sales were down. Product lines were stale. The company was drowning in $2.1 billion of debt. The once glittering Smith Tower now housed boardroom wars, mass layoffs, and desperate investors. Olivia Smith, once the darling of high society, had aged into bitterness, her charm corroded by whispers of infidelity and failing stock prices. Marcus spent his nights pacing the glass floors of his penthouse, the same one where he'd once handed Amari that check. The rain sounded different now, more like consequence than weather. He needed a lifeline. So when a mysterious investment group offered $800 million in exchange for 49% of Smith & Company, Marcus didn't hesitate. They called themselves Aurora Capital LP, a Delaware GP/LP structure whose ultimate beneficial owner was masked by the same Cayman Trust. SEC Schedule 13, D filings listed only institutional investors, standard for private equity roll-ups. Their paperwork was pristine, their proposal irresistible. Full capital injection, minimal interference. There was just one catch: proxy voting rights. What Marcus didn't realize was, those proxy voting rights handed Aurora Capital full control of the board. He'd sold 49% of the shares, but 100% of his power. Marcus brushed it off. Legal jargon, he thought. Nothing major. He didn't bother to read the fine print. He just signed. The relief was intoxicating. The company's stock rebounded. Journalists called it a historic comeback, and the board congratulated him for his genius. He was finally sleeping again. But he should have known better, because behind Aurora Capital LP, behind the pristine signatures, offshore bank accounts, and faceless representatives, was Amari Jones, the woman he'd paid to vanish, the woman who now legally and silently owned 51% of his company's voting power. The storm she'd walked out into 10 years ago had returned, this time under her command. The Smith annual gala had always been a spectacle: champagne, chandeliers, and the kind of superficial opulence only the rich could mistake for meaning. This year, though there was desperation behind the glitz, Marcus knew the truth. The company was hanging by a thread. Still, he smiled for the cameras, shaking hands, posing beside Olivia, pretending his empire wasn't rotting from within. At precisely 8 p.m., he took the stage. The ballroom quieted, glasses clinking, as investors turned their attention to him. "Tonight," Marcus began, voice confident but rehearsed, "we celebrate a new era for Smith & Company, a partnership that will define our future." He paused, waiting for applause that came half-heartedly. Then he continued, "Please join me in welcoming our new majority partner." The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. Then from the grand staircase, a single spotlight illuminated a woman in an emerald gown. Natural curls framed her face like a halo of defiance. Gold jewelry glinted under the chandeliers. Her walk was deliberate, every step echoing through the marble. Amari Jones had returned. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Marcus froze mid-sentence, the color draining from his face. Olivia's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered at her feet. Amari reached the stage, her expression calm, almost regal. "Didn't expect to see me again, did you?" she said softly into the mic. The audience gasped. Phones lifted. Flashes exploded like lightning. Marcus took a step forward, his voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" "What I should have done a long time ago," Amari replied. She handed the event technician a USB drive. "Play the presentation." The giant screen behind them flickered to life. Slide 1. A redacted bank deposit image. Account numbers blacked out. Amount $1 million. Memo line visible. "For your silence and your future." The room fell silent. Amari's voice was steady as she spoke. 10 years ago, Marcus Smith gave me this check, told me to leave the city, to disappear, and then he made sure the world believed I was a criminal. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus tried to grab the mic, but 2 security guards, the new ones Amari herself had quietly hired through Aurora Capital, stepped between them. Marcus hadn't questioned the change. The event planner said the Aurora team was required for insurance compliance. She clicked to the next slide. Slide 2. Fake emails. Doctored bank statements. Metadata highlighted in red. Every so-called proof of embezzlement, Amari said, her tone sharp, was manufactured by someone inside Smith & Company. Gas spread like wildfire. Marcus never corrected the story, she continued. He let it destroy me, my reputation, my career, because it was convenient. Her voice didn't tremble. If anything, it grew stronger with every word. Then, slide 3, Jones Glow's logo filled the screen. Under it, bold numbers, annual revenue, $1.1 billion, trailing 12 months, exceeds Smith & Company's current market cap. A wave of murmurs broke out across the ballroom. Amari turned toward Marcus, eyes unblinking. The woman you paid to vanish built a company worth more than yours, and she just bought you out. She clicked the final slide. Slide 4, a legal document stamped and signed, ownership transfer effective tonight. Jones Glow, subsidiary of Aurora Capital LP, now owns 51% of Smith & Company. Marcus lunged for the laptop. Security stopped him cold. "Marcus Smith," Amari said into the mic, "you're officially an employee at your own company." The audience erupted, some in laughter, some in shock, some in applause. Olivia's jaw dropped. Marcus's face turned ghost white. Amari turned back to the crowd, her expression serene. Justice doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in boardrooms, and with that, she walked off stage. Phones flashed. Reporters shouted. Behind her, Marcus Smith, the man who'd once told her to disappear, stood frozen under the lights as his empire slipped away in front of 400 witnesses. The gala was chaos. Reporters swarmed. Security tried to hold them back. Marcus barked orders that no one obeyed. Olivia stood frozen beside the stage, her face pale and tight. Amari was already gone, leaving behind a ballroom full of gasps and flashing lights. Marcus turned on his wife. "Did you know about this? Did you?" Before he could finish, Amari's voice came through the speakers again. She hadn't left. She'd moved backstage, mic still on. "There's one more thing you all should see," she said. The screen flickered again, cutting through the noise. Text messages appeared. Time-stamped, authenticated, unmistakably real. The messages had been subpoenaed from AT&T's legacy SMS archive during a quiet 2024 whistleblower lawsuit against Whitmore Logistics. Amari's counsel obtained them legally. Chain of custody sealed. From Olivia Whitmore to Marcus Smith, dated 10 years ago. Get rid of the black girl. "I'll make sure the board blames her. Then you're mine." A collective gasp swept through the room. Marcus's eyes widened. He looked at Olivia in disbelief, but she was already backing away. "They'll never accept her, Marcus. You know that. I can fix it. Just do it. She'll sign the NDA if you make her desperate enough." The ballroom erupted into shouting. Investors, board members, journalists all clamored for answers. Olivia's carefully curated image shattered in seconds. "Those were private," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You hacked." "No," Amari's voice interrupted. "I archived." "You just forgot how thorough I am." Olivia bolted for the exit. Reporters chased her, cameras flashing as her heels clicked furiously across the marble. Marcus stood frozen, exposed, cornered, powerless. The same man who once controlled every headline now watched his life unravel, live-streamed to the world. By the next morning, Olivia's PR team released a statement claiming the texts were doctored. But the damage was irreversible. Olivia Whitmore Smith's name became a trending synonym for betrayal. Her family quietly removed her from their foundation. The same board that once shielded her wouldn't even take her calls. And Marcus? He'd become the villain in a redemption story that wasn't his. Overnight, Smith & Company's stock plunged 62%. Investors pulled out. The company that once defined luxury was suddenly radioactive. Marcus spent the following weeks trying to regain control. Emergency meetings, rally support, even attempted a buyback, but the numbers didn't lie. Jones Glow owned the majority, and every time Marcus walked into the office, the same employees who once bowed to him now whispered when he passed. Amari didn't fire him. Not immediately. She didn't need to. Instead, she made him face what it felt like to be invisible. She moved the headquarters to Atlanta. Jones Smith HQ, the new name proudly displayed in gold letters. The Smith name remained only because she wanted it under hers. The rebrand took 89 days. Shareholder vote, SEC Form 8K, new ticker, JNSM. All while Marcus's advisory role quietly expired. 90 days, lightning speed by corporate standards. But Amari had waited 10 years for this moment. Marcus was assigned to an advisory position, a title without power. His keycard access was downgraded. His private elevator deactivated. His glass-walled office converted into a mentorship center for women in leadership. When he entered the new building for the first time, the receptionist didn't recognize him. "Name, please," she asked politely. "Marcus Smith," he said, almost whispering. She looked him up in the system, frowned slightly. "Ah, advisory role. Elevator 3, sir." No one greeted him upstairs. No one made eye contact. For the first time in his life, Marcus Smith was just another employee. walking through an empire that no longer belonged to him. And Amari? She sat in the CEO's office overlooking the city where his name had once been etched on the door. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply worked, the same way she had when no one believed in her. By the end of the quarter, Jones Smith Beauty had fully absorbed Smith & Company's operations. A joint press release went viral. Jones Smith Beauty, glow that can't be bought. The world loved it. Poetic, powerful, progressive. Marcus watched the announcement from home, alone. In the reflection of his blank television screen, he saw not a CEO, but a man who traded love for legacy and lost both. 6 months later, a local Atlanta paper ran a quiet headline. Jones Smith Foundation opens shelter for women in corporate transition. The article mentioned Amari's new project, the Amari House, a shelter dedicated to helping Black women escape workplace discrimination and rebuild their lives. The grand opening was modest, but the atmosphere was warm. Flowers, volunteers, soft music, hope. As the guests left and the photographers packed up, Amari stayed behind stacking leftover pamphlets when the door creaked open. Marcus stood there. No suit, no entourage, just a wrinkled shirt and a manila envelope in his hands. She froze, unsure whether to tell him to leave or to listen. He stepped forward, eyes downcast, and handed her the envelope. Inside was a typed resignation letter and a cashier's check, drawn from the sale of his Hamptons cottage, one of the few assets he still owned. $1 million. Payable to the Amari House. Underneath a handwritten note, I was wrong. Let this be the start. Amari stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked up. I don't need your money, Marcus. I know, he said quietly, but I need to do something that isn't selfish. For the first time in years, his voice cracked, not out of anger, but humility. She folded the check, placed it back in the envelope, and handed him a mop. Start by cleaning the floors, she said softly, not as punishment, but as perspective. Like I did. Marcus blinked, surprised, then nodded. And he did, in silence. No cameras, no audience. Just a man and his mistakes reflected in a freshly mopped floor. For weeks he kept coming back, cleaning, fixing, helping. He never spoke about it publicly, and Amari never forgave him out loud. But the quiet between them became less sharp, more human. 1 year later, spring sunlight poured through a quiet garden in Atlanta. The air smelled of Amari flowers, fittingly, and soft violin music floated through the trees. A small crowd of friends, colleagues, and family sat under white canopies, their faces bright with joy. At the end of the aisle, Amari Jones stood in a simple ivory silk gown. No diamonds, no extravagance, just elegance that didn't need permission. Her hair was in soft coils crowned with gold pins shaped like stars. And waiting for her was Dr. Malik Reed, the chemist who had co-created the first Jones Glow Serum. He wasn't rich or famous, but he'd seen her, truly seen her, back when she was rebuilding from ashes. He'd stayed when the world had called her a fraud. He'd built formulas beside her in that tiny Atlanta office, sharing instant noodles and dreams. Now as he took her hands, he whispered, "You built an empire. Let me help you build peace." Their vows were short but powerful. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Amari felt a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying finally lift. Applause filled the garden. The team from Jones Smith, her friends, her mentors, all cheering for a woman who had turned betrayal into brilliance. Marcus was there in a catering apron, volunteering through the Amari House outreach program. Amari had approved his community service hours months ago. For a brief moment, Amari caught his gaze. He didn't smile. Neither did she. But there was something between them, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed. Then she turned back to Malik, her new husband, and walked hand in hand toward the sunlight. Marcus stayed behind until the chairs were empty, until the music stopped, until the garden was silent again. Then he whispered, "Goodbye, Amari," and left. Night had fallen over Atlanta. In her office at Jones Smith HQ, Amari stood by the window, looking out over the glittering skyline. The city reflected back the light she had earned. Not stolen, not borrowed, but built. On her desk sat a small wooden frame. Inside it, a bank-certified copy of the endorsed check original, destroyed after deposit. She ran her fingers along the edge of the glass, reading the memo line again. For your silence and your future. She smiled faintly. 10 years ago, it had been payment for her disappearance. Now it was proof of her resurrection. She slid the certified copy into a shredder. The machine whirred. 10 years of silence shredded in 10 seconds. She closed her office blinds, turned off the lights, and walked through the quiet halls of the company that now bore her name. Every photo, every trophy, every award in those halls told the story of power. But hers told the story of reclamation. As she stepped outside, a light drizzle began to fall, almost poetic. She tilted her head back, eyes closed, and let the rain kiss her skin. They said she disappeared. What they didn't see was how she came back. Not as the broken fiancé who left in the storm, but as the storm itself. Months later, Forbes published a feature titled, "The Woman Who Bought Her Ex-Fiancé's Company and Then Rebuilt It." Ironically, the same magazine that had once profiled Marcus Smith now celebrated the woman he erased. The interviewer asked her one final question. "What would you say to the man who underestimated you?" Amari smiled. "Thank you," she said. "He taught me the cost of silence and the value of being loud in your own success." The article went viral, but Amari barely noticed. She was already busy in the lab with Malik and her team working on Jones Smith's next big innovation, a skincare line dedicated to women who'd been told they weren't enough. Each bottle carried the slogan that had become her legacy, "Glow that can't be bought." If he paid you to vanish, would you come back to own him or forgive him? Before you go, hit that subscribe button, because the next story just might be yours.